9 kings dead, 3 kingdoms turned to ash. The Vikings had arrived, and they had no mercy. The great pagan armada swept through Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia like a tsunami. They didn't seek gold, they sought land. They sought blood. And at their front went Ivar the Boneless. Legend said his legs were useless cartilage, a birth curse. But Ivar had turned that weakness into the most terrifying weapon of the 9th century. A cripple who commanded the world's most brutal warriors. If a man who couldn't walk could bring all of England to its knees, what hope did the Christians have? It was the year 870. Only one kingdom remained. Wessex, a land of marshes and farms that stood between Ivar and total control. To Ivar, this should have been simple. Another Saxon king to behead, another church to burn. But he was about to make his only fatal mistake. He underestimated a man who loved books more than swords. Alfred was a 21-year-old, sickly, plagued by stomach pains, who preferred translating Latin to leading cavalry. To Viking eyes, Alfred was easy prey. Yet when Ivar's ships sailed up the Thames, something changed. Viking scouts returned with news of organized patrols, hidden supplies, an enemy who didn't run but calculated. The war turned into a chess match. At Reading, Ivar launched his massive frontal charge. But the Saxon line bent and didn't break. It made the Vikings bleed like no one had in 5 years. Alfred was learning at terrifying speed. 4 days later, Alfred led his men to a hill called Ashton. Ivar split his army, a classic trap, but Alfred attacked uphill. Thousands of men collided like freight trains around a single hawthorn tree. Ivar's invincibility began to crack. The Saxons fought with desperate fury. Alfred charged like a wild boar. It was pure will. By day's end, Ashdown was covered in Nordic corpses. 1 Viking king, 5 earls, thousands of warriors lay dead. Ivar didn't die that day, but his aura of invincibility did. The news spread like wildfire. Demons bleed. Demons die. Ivar looked at casualty reports. The math was brutal. Every warrior he lost was irreplaceable. Alfred was home. Every Saxon farmer was a potential soldier. Ivar needed to change the game. His gaze crossed the Irish Sea toward Dublin. The decision was made. He'd leave the great pagan army to his brothers and claim a throne across the sea. Dublin was Western Europe's slave trade hub. Black wooden walls, mud mixed with blood, and the constant sound of chains. Ivar arrived as a king claiming his throne. But Dublin already had a king, Olaf the White. What happens when 2 alpha predators are locked in the same cage? The air grew thick with violence. Then the unexpected happened. There was no duel. There was fusion. Ivar and Olaf became the twin kings of Dublin. Olaf provided the muscle. Ivar provided the mind. Their first order wasn't defense, it was hunting. Ivar exploited Ireland's chaos with surgical precision. Raids began immediately. Lightning attacks on monasteries and villages, not for gold, but for people. Within months, Dublin's slave markets overflowed. Ivar was building a war machine. But for what? Northward in Scotland rose, a fortress never taken, Alt-Clut, the Rock of the Clyde. For 400 years, armies had crashed against its cliffs. To a normal strategist, attacking it was suicide. But Ivar saw a personal challenge. Alfred had denied him total victory. Ivar needed a trophy that would eclipse anything his brothers could achieve. In spring 870, 200 ships left Dublin. Defenders of Alt-Clut felt confident. They'd resisted sieges before. They had water, food, height. They didn't know Ivar had spent his life studying how to destroy things stronger than him. The siege began with silence. Ivar ordered total blockade. Olaf wanted to assault the gates. Ivar stopped him. "Time is our weapon," he said. "We only need to wait for thirst to do the dirty work." 1 month passed, 2 months, 3 months. Then the catastrophe occurred. The fortress well failed. The most terrifying sound wasn't a berserker's roar, but a bucket hitting stone bottom without finding water. Desperation seized the summit. The tongue swells, the skin cracks. The mind hallucinates. For months, that was the limit. The gates opened. Only skeletal figures exited with hands raised, begging for water. Ivar's victory was absolute. He'd captured the most important northern fortress without drawing his sword. Alt-Klut held generations of royal treasure. But the real treasure was the people. Thousands of prisoners, all chained and branded. In 871, the fleet returned to Dublin. 200 longships, decks crowded with slaves, holds bursting with gold. Ivar was at the peak of his power, the most feared man in the British Isles. But at his greatest triumph, a shadow hung over the Boneless, not from an enemy but from his own broken body. 2 years later, in 873, silence fell over Dublin. There was no battle, no assassination. The engine simply stopped. Ivar, king of the Northmen, ended his life. Died of a sudden and horrible disease. The invincible had died in his bed. The news shook the Viking world. In Wessex, Alfred breathed for the first time in years. The monster was gone, but Ivar didn't leave peace. He left a vacuum. Vacuums are filled with blood. The great pagan army fractured. One half colonized Northumbria. The other half looked south toward Wessex. Leading this faction was Guthrum, a ruthless pragmatist who understood that peace treaties were just tactical pauses to sharpen axes. For years, Hlafar and Guthrum played cat and mouse. Alfred tried everything, paid thousands in silver for the Vikings to leave. Guthrum accepted the gold, swore on his sacred arm ring, looked Alfred in the eye, took the money, and months later, attacked again. For Alfred, this was devastating. How do you fight an enemy who doesn't respect his word? The treasury emptied. Morale crumbled. Nobles whispered about surrender. Winter 878. In medieval war, winter is sacred. Oh, no one attacks. In January, Alfred withdrew to Chippenham, celebrating. With his family, relaxed, guard down. But Guthrum respected no seasons. In the darkness, thousands of Vikings marched in silence. Chippenham's gates burst open. Chaos was instant. Alfred's guards were massacred. The king fled like a thief, half-dressed, escaping into winter darkness. He left behind his kingdom, his wealth, his dignity. Wessex died. Guthrum sat on Alfred's throne, declared the south was his. Nobles surrendered in mass. The north has fallen. The east has fallen, and now the south is Danish. But Alfred wasn't dead. His flight took him to Athelney, an island in Somerset's salt marshes, a fugitive king hiding in a swamp, sleeping in mud. The final humiliation. The monarch reduced to beggar. But in that swamp, at his lowest point, Alfred became something dangerous. He couldn't beat Guthrum in pitched battle. He had to become a nightmare. From Athelney, Alfred began sending messengers. Small groups attacked Viking patrols, burned supplies, disappeared back into the swamp. You may have the throne, but you won't sleep easy. Resistance was born. Alfred forged a suicidal plan. He'd bet everything on one card. Final battle where either he recovered England or died with it. 7 weeks later, spring, 878 messengers moved through Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire with a whispered order. The king lives. Egbert's Stone, 7th week after Easter. On the appointed day, Alfred left the swamps. At Egbert's Stone, he found thousands of men waiting. When they saw their king, they received him as one resurrected from death. It wasn't a professional army. They were fathers, farmers, smiths, men who knew this was the last chance to prevent their culture from disappearing. Alfred gave them no time to celebrate. Surprise was his only advantage. 2 days of forced march to Edington. At dawn of the 3rd day, Guthrum saw a full Saxon army appear before him. The dead king was there, ready to collect every humiliation. The Vikings formed their shield wall. They expected English farmers to break at Nordic fury, but Alfred had changed. The intellectual had given way to the warrior, shoulder to shoulder. Shield to shield, the Saxons advanced, slow, methodical, unstoppable. The clash was tectonic. For hours, brutal slaughter. Either side yielded. But Alfred's men had nowhere to flee. Behind them, slavery. Ahead, freedom. They pushed and pushed. For the first time in a generation, the Viking wall retreated. At Eddington's top, the invincible Viking machine unraveled. It was a hunt. Wessex farmers pursued the warriors downhill, collecting blood for every burned farm. The Vikings fled too. Chippenham closed the gates, grateful to be alive. But Alfred didn't stop. He surrounded Chippenham before nightfall, didn't assault the walls. He sat down to wait. Seized all cattle, burned crops, established an airtight blockade. Ivar had used hunger to break the Clyde. Now Alfred used the same weapon against Ivar's heirs. 14 days Guthrum's surrender was total. He offered gold, hostages, weapons. Alfred had a plan beyond revenge. He couldn't kill them all. Another chieftain would take Guthrum's place in a month. He needed to neutralize the Viking threat at the root. Turn the wolf into a guard dog. Alfred's demand was simple. I'll spare your life, give you land, but you'll bend the knee to my god. Weeks later, Guthrum entered the baptismal font. Alfred acted as his godfather. When holy water touched the Viking's forehead, Guthrum died symbolically and was reborn. A Thelst. It was absolute political submission. The Treaty of Wedmore divided England. Northeast, the Danelaw under Guthrum. Southwest, Wessex under Alfred. Alfred had saved his kingdom from extinction. He'd stopped the unstoppable tide. Guthrum withdrew to East Anglia and never attacked Wessex again. But Alfred knew peace was a lie. While Wessex celebrated, the king didn't rest. The Treaty of Wedmore wasn't an end, but a pause. Guthrum was neutralized, but the sea remained. The sea brings monsters. During the years of silence, Alfred devoted himself to an unprecedented task. The old system was obsolete. He needed a kingdom always at war, even in peace. The Burr system was born. Fortified towns designed with chilling survival math. No village, no farm should be more than 20 miles. From a safe fortress, one day's march, 33 fortresses rose. Old Roman walls repaired, ditches dug, oak palisades raised. Alfred counted every head, every spear, every shield. He divided the male population into 2 shifts. Half worked the harvest. The other half patrolled with sword at belt. 6 months later, they rotated. Wessex became a militarized porcupine. Designed to bleed anyone who tried to bite it, in 892, the test came. A new wave. 250 ships in the Thames. A massive invasion force. They brought women and children. They came to stay. They disembarked, expecting panic. What they found was a wall. Vikings tried to push inland for food. They ran into local garrisons, tactical units. Tactical units couldn't break defenses before Alfred's relief army arrived. Their mobile warfare crashed against Alfred's rigid defense. Every river had a fort blocking the bridge. Every farm was empty, supplies safe behind palisades. For 4 years, war raged. It was brutal, exhausting. But the true victory wasn't won in an open field. It was won in logistics. Alfred's system worked. Kingdom didn't collapse. In 896, the Great Army broke. They fragmented. Those with money bought land in the Danelaw and settled. Those with nothing sailed to France. Alfred, the sickly king who never wanted to be a warrior, defeated the greatest threat of his time, not with an axe, but with his mind. He'd turned Wessex into an impregnable fortress. But time was coming for him. Alfred was 50, but his body looked 80. His stomach disease was consuming him. He knew the end was near. His greatest fear wasn't death, but what would happen after. He'd saved Wessex. He'd dreamed of something bigger. The union of all Anglo-Saxon Christians. England. But he wouldn't. See that promised land? Vikings hadn't left. They'd become neighbors. Dublin remained a slave power. York was a Viking city. The island was split in 2. Alfred called his son Edward, his daughter Ethelflad, the future lady of the Mercians. He left them a kingdom, but also a mission. Defending wasn't enough. They'd have to reconquer the north. They'd have to finish what started in Uthalni's swamps. The king closed his eyes for the last time in 899. The architect had fallen. The structure held. Across the border, Vikings sharpened their swords. The old lion was dead. The truce of fear had ended. The final battle for Britain's soul approached. A war that wouldn't define who ruled a kingdom, but what civilization would survive to write the history.